Bonjour tout le monde. Ça me fait plaisir d'être ici aujourd'hui, à l'un des plus beaux endroits au monde. Penticton, ça me donne des souvenirs excellents de ma jeunesse. Quand j'étais très jeune, mes parents m'ont emmené ici pour faire du camping et c'était vraiment une expérience excellente. À ce temps-là, j'avais le rêve de même pouvoir avoir un petit chalet ou quelque chose ici parce que pendant ce temps-là, on croyait au Canada que peu importe d'où on venait, on pouvait aller n'importe où avec le travail fort. Il y avait de l'espoir pour les jeunes. Mais aujourd'hui, cet espoir est perdu après 8 ans de Justin Trudeau. Après 8 ans de Justin Trudeau, la vie coûte plus cher pour nos aînés, nos jeunes et nos travailleurs à cause de ces taxes carbone et ces augmentations de déficit inflationniste. Le travail n'est plus payant à cause des impôts qui enlèvent trop des chèques de paie des travailleurs. Le coût de logement a doublé à cause des hausses de taux d'intérêt sur les hypothèques et la bureaucratie qui empêche la construction de maisons. Le crime, le chaos, les drogues et le désordre sont plus communs à cause de la libération facile pour des criminels récidivistes. Et Justin Trudeau essaie de diviser pour distraire des gens de tout ce qu'il a brisé. Après 8 ans de Justin Trudeau, tout semble être brisé. Et aujourd'hui, les Canadiens sont frappés avec une autre augmentation dans le taux d'intérêt que Justin Trudeau a promis n'allait jamais arriver. Justin Trudeau a dit aux Canadiens que la dette n'a pas de conséquences. Mauvaise surprise aujourd'hui. Il avait tort. Ces taxes et déficits inflationnistes ont forcé la Banque du Canada d'augmenter les taux d'intérêt. Et maintenant, les Canadiens n'ont aucune idée comment payer leur hypothèque. Il y a des familles de la classe moyenne, de la fameuse classe moyenne, qui s'inquiètent de perdre leur maison. Des jeunes qui ne rêvent même plus d'avoir une maison après 8 ans de Justin Trudeau. Et il y a des aînés qui n'ont aucune idée comment se nourrir et de chauffer leur maison. Assez, c'est assez. Un gouvernement Poilievre va utiliser le gros bon sens pour éliminer les déficits inflationnistes qui ont causé cette inflation. On va équilibrer le budget pour réduire les taux d'intérêt et l'inflation. Et on va annuler la taxe carbone de 20 sous le litre de Justin Trudeau afin de rendre les prix plus bas pour tous les Canadiens. C'est ça le gros bon sens. Et c'est ce que nous allons faire pour les Canadiens à travers le pays. Thank you very much, everyone. It's great to be here. It's great to be here with my beautiful wife, Anna, in Penticton, one of the most incredible places in the world. When I was a kid growing up in the West, my folks would bring us here for a little camping trip. And I remember those great days. We didn't have a ton of money. My folks were teachers, but they could afford to throw us all in the car and drive us out here and throw up a tent and get a campfire going. And I always thought if I ever did well enough when I got older, I might even have a little cottage out here. That was at a time when everything seemed possible in Canada. You worked hard, you could achieve anything. It didn't matter where you came from. It mattered where you were going. It didn't matter who you knew. It mattered what you could do. And that's the country I want for my kids and for all Canadians. But lately, that's not the country we've seen. After 8 years of Trudeau, life costs more for our seniors, our youth, and our workers after his inflationary carbon taxes and deficits have driven up the cost of everything. Work doesn't pay because Trudeau eats up too much of your paycheck with his higher payroll and income taxes. Housing costs have doubled to the point where 9 in 10 young people believe they'll never be able to afford a home. It wasn't like that before Trudeau. In fact, it's never been like that. This is a brand new problem. This is the first generation of young people in the history of Canada that believe they will never be able to afford a home. After 8 years of Trudeau, crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder are common in our streets after he released repeat violent criminals through same-day bail and catch-and-release policies. And after 8 years of Trudeau, he tries to divide, to distract people from all that he has broken. But the worst came today. Trudeau had promised Canadians that they didn't have to worry about higher interest rates, that rates would be low forever. Today, his policies have forced the Bank of Canada to deliver another uppercut to Canadian families who are drowning in debt. We have the most indebted households in all of the G7 after 8 years of Trudeau. And now that debt is colliding with rapidly rising interest rates. Rates have gone from 0.25 all the way up to 5%, an absolutely astounding increase, 20 times higher than they were just over a year ago, all after Trudeau promised that they would stay low. These rates are obviously set by the Bank of Canada, but the culprit is Justin Trudeau. His inflationary carbon tax and deficits are driving up the inflation rate, which forces the Bank of Canada to increase the interest rate. And now Canadians are hit with the double whammy of higher costs for food, gas, housing, and groceries, and now higher costs on all that debt that Trudeau's policies have forced them to take on. Enough. We need to get back to common sense. A Poilievre-led government will bring home lower prices by axing the carbon tax, balancing the budget to bring down inflation and interest rates. We'll make work pay by lowering income taxes so people bring home more of each dollar they earn. We'll bring homes that people can afford again by incentivizing the cities to clear away the bureaucracy, free up land, and speed up building permits. We're going to make this the fastest place on earth to get a building permit. We're going to sell off 6,000 federal buildings and tens of thousands of acres of federal land so that we can build the millions of homes that are needed so that our young people can have the hope of home ownership again. We're going to bring home safe streets with jail and not bail for repeat violent offenders and treatment, not free tax-funded narcotics for addicts, so we can bring home our loved ones drug-free. We're going to bring home hope. We're going to make this once again a country that works for the people who do the work. We're going to make this a country where it doesn't matter where you come from. It matters where you're going. It doesn't matter who you knew. It matters what you can do. That's the country that I remember when I came to camp here with my folks as a kid. It's the country that brought my wife here as a refugee. It's the country we want for our kids and yours. It's the country that we love. Let's bring it home. Thank you very much. Questions?
Talking about selling off land and buildings and cutting taxes, wouldn't all those things have an inflationary effect?
They'd have a deflationary effect.
How so?
Well, start with land. Well, the reason we have the worst housing crisis in the G7 is because we have the lowest number of houses per capita of all G7 countries. It's kind of an ironic thing that we have the fewest houses per capita of all G7 countries, even though we have the most land to build on. That's why housing is about half the cost in the United States as it is here in Canada. We know that price is set by only two things: supply and demand. We have lots of demand because our population grew by 1 million people last year, but we don't have the supply because we only build about 200,000 houses. So how do we get more supply? We free up land, we remove the bureaucracy, and allow people to build, build, build. We go from being the second slowest place to get a building permit to being the fastest place in the OECD. That's how we're going to bring it home.
Canada's not the only country struggling with inflation, but Canada's the only one with Justin Trudeau. Why is the U.S., why is Europe struggling with inflation if you're pinning this all on Justin Trudeau?
Well, let's start with housing inflation. We have the worst housing inflation of any of the G7 countries. Our housing is almost twice as expensive as the Americans after 8 years of Justin Trudeau. During his time in office, home prices have doubled. The average mortgage payment has doubled. The average rent doubled. The needed down payment has doubled. Canada used to have affordable housing. In fact, there was never a generation in Canadian history of young people who didn't believe they could afford a home. That only happened after 8 years of Justin Trudeau. It's true that consumer price inflation has been high in all countries that have Trudeau's policies. So where there are big deficits and high taxes, there's high inflation. And where there are more fiscal discipline and lower taxes, there's low inflation. So it's true that other countries have made dumb decisions. That doesn't justify our Prime Minister for doing the same. Our parents taught us as kids that just because our friends are jumping off a bridge doesn't mean we have to as well.
You compared Kelowna to a third world country. What do you think of Penticton?
I think both of these places are the most beautiful in the world. What I said of Kelowna is that it's just incredible that places like downtown East Side Vancouver, Peterborough, Kelowna, parts of Toronto, parts of Calgary have had these tent cities go up that if you were looking at them, you didn't know where you were, you might think you were in a third world country. But this is life in Canada now after 8 years of Justin Trudeau. Not only were these scenes not visible to us or not around 8 years ago, they weren't even imaginable. But after 8 years of Trudeau's destructive economic policies, the doubling of housing costs, the rising cost of energy, people are forced out of their homes and onto the streets, living in tents. His policies on drugs and crime have left people destitute and stuck in these horrible situations. But the good news is we can turn the hurt that he's caused into the hope that Canadians need. And we'll be working with people in cities like Kelowna.
So is Penticton first world or third world in your opinion?
First world. Okay. All of Canada's first world. And we want to keep it that way. That's why we have to reverse the policies of Trudeau that have caused so much hardship for so many people. And we're going to get people into homes they can afford. We're going to get treatment so they're no longer addicted to drugs. Because we know the policies that Trudeau has taken on housing, on inflation, and on drugs have given us tent cities. I want to give people homes and hope.
Mr. Poilievre, the issue of the port strike here, the federal government has mandated, put a limit on negotiations. If they do go ahead and mandate back-to-work legislation, would the Conservative government support that?
Well, first and foremost, we want Trudeau to do his job. This is a federal port. These are federally regulated workers, and this is a federal strike. Justin Trudeau is the federal Prime Minister. His incompetence, though, has been staggering in this strike. First of all, he's forced the workers into a desperate lose-lose position. His carbon taxes and inflation have forced workers to fight for their livelihoods, in some cases by going on strike. They can't pay their bills, and I understand why they're so desperate. Most Canadians are now after 8 years of Trudeau. We need to start by reversing these policies so that hardworking, blue-collar union folks like the port workers can pay less and bring home more. With regards to the strike, it's a federally mediated strike, and Trudeau's minister has been totally incapable of getting the parties to the table and getting a deal. Our first goal is to get the workers and management together for a fair deal that works for both the employees and the employer so that we can get our goods moving again. We want Justin Trudeau to snap into action, stop the incompetence, and get an end to the strike.
At what point would you approve of back-to-work legislation in this case?
I don't want to answer hypotheticals, but I think our goal is to get a mutually agreed upon deal that's fair to the workers and fair to the employer so that we can get our goods flowing again.
Now, you had mentioned grocery inflation as one of the things, the cost of grocery being increased by inflation, but there have been multiple reports that the cost of groceries, among other things, have become totally disconnected from actual inflation and supply chain costs. How would you address that base need for most Canadians beyond just inflation? Because it is beyond inflation.
Well, first, you're right. The food prices are now growing faster than at any time in my life. Why? Well, because the carbon tax on the farmers who make the food and the truckers who ship the food is a tax on all who buy the food. This is a Trudeau tax that is adding thousands of dollars in extra costs to British Columbians and all Canadians. The parliamentary budget officer has shown that 60% of people pay more in the carbon tax than they'll ever get back in rebates. And now there's a second carbon tax with no rebate at all. So I will axe the tax on our farmers and truckers to bring home more affordable groceries.
But that is a supply chain cost. The carbon tax is a supply chain cost, and the reports have been saying that the cost in groceries at the store when you pick them up are beyond supply chain, the supply chain rises.
Yeah.
That it's, some say that it is grocery companies are gouging the average Canadian. How would you address that?
That's possible. I think after 8 years of Trudeau, there's less and less competition. Our economy is controlled by fewer and fewer powerful corporations. That, combined with the skyrocketing carbon tax on the farmers who make the food and the truckers who ship the food, is driving up the cost on those who buy the food. So we need to axe the tax and open up more competition in our economy so that Canadians can bring home affordable groceries.
Do you have a plan to win back this riding? It was traditionally Conservative. It's been NDP a couple times. What's going to take to get it back and wrestle it back from MP Cannings?
Well, the NDP and the local MP have sold out Penticton, Trail, and the many local communities in this riding. The NDP member of Parliament here doesn't work for South Okanagan Kootenay. He works for Justin Trudeau. He's signed a deal with Justin Trudeau to go into a costly coalition. And the NDP is voting to hike the carbon tax on rural communities where they have no choice but to drive long distances. The NDP's voted to ban hunting rifles in a largely rural riding where hunting is a part of the way of life. The NDP supports Trudeau's housing inflation. They support all the policies he's brought in that have helped double housing costs over the last 8 years. So the question is, do you want an MP who works for the South Okanagan and the Kootenays, or do you want an MP who works for Justin Trudeau? The people here deserve a strong voice for them, someone who will bring home lower prices by axing the carbon tax, bring home powerful paychecks with lower income tax, bring homes people can afford by removing the gatekeepers to build more, and bring home some common sense by going after real violent criminals instead of going after lawful hunters and farmers.
Do you have a candidate here yet? Are you thinking of anyone?
We'll have the members will choose the candidate. That's how we do it. Grassroots, because the candidate we elect as MP in this community will work for this community. They won't work for Justin Trudeau in a costly coalition with the NDP.
Nick, one last question.
A man showed up in Alberta with a straight pride shirt, posing with politicians for photo ops. What do you say about that kind of messaging as people from the LGBTQ plus community are fighting for equality in Canada?
I don't agree with that shirt.
Now, if a MP Cannings is re-elected and there is a Conservative government in the next election, how will you plan to work with him to make sure that communities like his, which do not have a Conservative member of Parliament, are represented in your government?
We'll work with members of Parliament of all parties to serve the people. At the end of the day, this is a country where the government is servant and not master. At least that's the way it's supposed to be. And when I'm Prime Minister, that is the way it will be. My message, though, is that the people, the Okanagan and the Kootenays, need someone who's working for them, not someone who sells them out to sign a coalition deal with Trudeau, to hike taxes, ban hunting rifles, make housing more expensive. That's what you've got from voting for the NDP. You've got Justin Trudeau and the disastrous policies that are unfolding before our eyes. What we need is a change. Someone who will work for this community first, that will bring the common sense of the common people, united for our common home. And that's what you'll get with a Conservative Member of Parliament here in this community.
Mr.
Thanks very
Poilievre,
much.
Why don't you agree
Thank
with
you.
that straight broad shirt?